Most men don't realize what they're avoiding. They think they're being strong. They think they're being rational. They think they're protecting themselves. But years later, something catches up to them. It shows up as distance, as quiet resentment, as a strange emptiness they can't explain. And by the time they notice it, the cost has already been paid. Not in one dramatic collapse, but slowly, silently, in ways no one warned them about. What men avoid isn't weakness. What men avoid is emotional exposure in the moment where you allow yourself to be seen without armor, and the price of avoiding it is always higher than expected. The habit men learn early. Most men are trained very early to do one thing exceptionally well, hold it together. You're taught to stabilize, to manage, to endure. You learn that discomfort is something to outlast, not something to explore. And at first, this works. You perform, you achieve, you survive, but the skill that keeps you upright in your 20s becomes the thing that hollows you out in your 40s, because what you avoided doesn't disappear. It accumulates. And most men think avoiding emotional exposure keeps them safe, but what it really does is delay the cost. When you avoid saying what you feel, when you avoid admitting confusion, fear, or longing, you don't eliminate the emotion. You store it. And stored emotion doesn't stay quiet forever. It leaks into irritability, into distance, into sudden withdrawal you can't explain. Men don't break because they feel too much. They break because they carry too much alone for too long. Avoidance doesn't protect you. It just charges interest. And the bill always comes later. Why avoidance feels like control. Avoidance feels powerful. Not reacting, not needing, not asking. There's a false sense of mastery in saying, I'm fine, especially when you're not. Because avoidance gives you something very seductive. Predictability. If you never open up, you never risk rejection. If you never ask, you never hear no. If you never expose your inner world, no one can mishandle it. But control is not connection, and what you avoid externally, you still experience internally. The quiet trade men make, most men make a trade they don't realize they're making. They trade emotional access for emotional stability. They tell themselves, I don't need to talk about it. It's not that serious. I'll deal with it later. But later never comes. What comes instead is less intimacy, fewer deep friendships, a partner who feels shut out, a sense of living next to life instead of inside it. This isn't because men are incapable. It's because men were never taught that emotional exposure is a skill, not a flaw. Men don't avoid emotional exposure because they're weak. They avoid it because it feels unsafe. When you grow up learning that strength means self-containment, opening up feels like losing control. So you trade depth for stability. You stay calm, but distant. Functional, but disconnected. And years later, you wonder why relationships feel thin, why conversations stay surface level, why no one really knows you. The cost wasn't paid up front. It was paid slowly, in connection you never built. What avoidance does to relationships. In relationships, avoidance is often misread. You think you're being respectful. Your partner feels you're being unavailable. You think you're not burdening anyone. Your partner feels shut out. You think silence equals peace. But silence often creates confusion, not calm. Emotional avoidance doesn't make relationships easier. It makes them less honest. And honesty is what intimacy requires. Imagine two men facing the same internal struggle. Both feel overwhelmed. Both feel uncertain. Both feel emotionally stretched. The first man avoids it. He stays busy. He distracts himself. He keeps things moving. The second man pauses. He names what he's feeling, even clumsily. Yes, he allows discomfort to exist without fixing it. Years later, their lives look very different. The first man is functional, but restless. The second man is steadier. Not because life is easier, but because he is more integrated. The difference was never intelligence, it was willingness. Avoidance doesn't make men strong, and it makes them efficient. Efficient at surviving, efficient at functioning, efficient at not falling apart. But strength isn't just staying upright. Strength is staying connected to yourself and to others. Men who avoid emotional exposure often succeed externally while quietly losing access to their inner life. And one day, they realize they've been managing life instead of actually living it. Why? Men pay later, not now. The consequences of avoidance don't show up immediately. That's why it's so tempting. You don't lose your job tomorrow. Your relationship doesn't collapse overnight. Your friendships don't disappear instantly. Instead, you notice things like conversations feel repetitive. Emotional moments feel muted. You feel misunderstood but can't explain why. Avoidance works until it doesn't. And when it stops working, men often mistake the pain for burnout, boredom, or loss of motivation. But it's not. It's emotional debt coming due. This is where men get stuck. When the cost finally becomes visible, many men don't know what to do. They try harder, they optimize, they self-improve, but the solution isn't more effort, it's less avoidance, and that feels terrifying if you've built your identity on self-sufficiency. The most dangerous belief men hold is this: if I can handle it alone, I should. That belief builds independence, but destroys connection, because humans don't heal through isolation. They regulate through relationship. Avoiding emotional exposure keeps you self-contained, but it also keeps you emotionally alone. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to reopen doors you never practiced opening. What emotional exposure actually is, let's be clear, emotional exposure is not dumping, it's not collapsing, it's not losing control, it's the ability to say, this is what's happening inside me, without knowing the outcome. It's allowing uncertainty without shutting down. It's choosing honesty over image. This is not softness. This is courage, the masculine skill. No one teaches. Men are taught how to act under pressure. They are rarely taught how to stay present inside pressure. That's the skill most men avoid, and it's the one they pay for later. Because the men who learn it don't just survive life. They experience it. Men avoid emotional exposure because no one taught them how to do it safely. But avoidance doesn't make pain disappear. It just delays growth. The men who feel most alive aren't the toughest. They're the ones who learned how to stay present with discomfort without shutting themselves down. That's not weakness. That's emotional strength built over time. If this resonates, stay with this channel. Not for motivation, not for quick fixes, but for slow, grounded understanding of the male emotional world without shame. What changes when men stop avoiding? When men stop avoiding emotional exposure, something subtle shifts. They don't become louder, they become clearer, they don't become needy, they become grounded, they don't lose control, they gain self-trust, and the world responds differently to them. Not because they changed who they are, but because they stopped hiding parts of themselves. Avoidance keeps men stable, but not whole. Wholeness comes from integration, not from suppression. When men allow themselves to feel without judgment, they don't become weaker. They become more precise, more present, more emotionally reliable, and that's what real strength looks like over time. And men avoid emotional exposure because it once kept them safe. But what protected you once may now be limiting you. You don't pay the price immediately. You pay it later. In intimacy you never built, in conversations you never had, in parts of yourself you kept hidden for too long. The moment you stop avoiding isn't dramatic. It's quiet, and it's the beginning of something far more stable than control. Self-respect. If this helped, take it with you. And when you're ready, come back. This space is built for men who are done avoiding and ready to understand themselves without losing who they are.